All right, just in, a historic environmental decision in the state of California today. Air quality officials voting a short time ago to require all new cars sold in the state to be zero-emission vehicles by 2035, just about 13 years from now. It's a really significant move. California is the largest auto market in the U.S. Gas vehicle emissions are the biggest source of carbon dioxide in California and make up about 40% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing those emissions will also reduce the risk of severe drought, wildfires that wreak havoc on the state. Governor Gavin Newsom calling the decision a great transformation. Listen to this.
The car manufacturers themselves are celebrating and embracing it, including Toyota today, not just Ford and GM. We are going through one of the great transformations in our history, energy transformations.
Steve Patterson joining us now. This is huge, Steve. I got to say, and I bet gas companies aren't necessarily happy about it right about now. How do you do this? How do you implement a plan like this? What is the phase-out schedule?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to start out by saying this. Symbolically, California wants this to be the beginning of the end of the era of the gas-powered car, full stop. 11% of all new passenger car sales across the country come from California. You know, more than a dozen other states are expected to follow their lead. Massachusetts, New York, Washington State all have similar goals, for instance. So, yes, to do that, it kind of has to come in installments, right? So all new cars sold in California by 2035 would be free of greenhouse gas emissions like carbon dioxide. But the plan is to start curbing this early with targets along the way. So the state wants 35% of new passenger vehicles sold at zero emissions by 2025. It wants 68% by 2030. And finally, you guessed it, 100% by 2035. And to enforce this, automakers would be fined by up to $20,000 for every car that falls short of that production goal. But it's a lot. I mean, you're talking about a market that's at about 18% right now, jumping up, as you mentioned, to 100% in just 13 years.
So
Jasmine?
Talk to me about affordability here, right? Because two things. For folks that don't necessarily have the money to buy a new car, they go out and buy a used car. That would be a gas car in that instance, right? And or you're looking at cars that are electric that are a little bit more expensive than their kind of gas models that are on the same plane.
Yeah, a lot more expensive. And I think those two things are very much linked. This is kind of the ultimate cart before the horse argument right now. A lot of people calling this more aspirational than tangible because of a lot of factors. You've got, a supply chain mess, infrastructure that would have to be overhauled. And then, yes, in a lot of cases, this is prohibitively expensive technology. These cars are not cheap. No. You're not going to get an electric car for less than $25,000 in California.
Wow. It
ain't going to happen. And then for a lot of the ones that are out there right now, they're getting marked up because there's such heavy demand. So on average, you're paying closer to about $65,000 or so. So to offset this, there are a number of subsidies, there are rebates for consumers, but there's a huge backlog and those programs need to be expanded. And then on top of that, you're talking about not enough charging stations in the state. We're at something like 80,000 right now. You'd have to be at more than 1 million by 2030, although there is funding for more of that expansion. And then experts say, finally, California's grid, which still largely relies on fossil fuels, is likely nowhere near robust enough to handle millions of electric vehicles all being plugged in at the same time. So, you're talking about more backups like diesel generators or natural gas plants or nuclear energy from the one plant that's still in California to try to keep pace, Yasmin.
13 years. They got 13 years. The clock starts now. So we heard obviously from Newsom as I came to you that automakers, they're on board with this, right? What about environmentalists? What are they saying?
So that's kind of the other side of the coin to what I was just talking about, right? There's certainly nothing that says the law is going to mandate, for instance, taking gas-guzzling cars off the road. You can't stop people from driving in California. Also has no impact on the used car market. And then, most gas-powered cars live on average from 15 to 20 years. So there's nothing to say that we won't still be seeing a lot of these conventional vehicles on the road well into 2050. So there's a lot of concern from environmentalists that say, we haven't pushed this far enough. It isn't coming soon enough. So you're kind of hearing both sides of the coin as officials debate what to do next.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.